What I'd like to do is start the presentation with a brief overview of our company. Some of you may be aware of the assets that we have in respect of chromium. Some of you may not. It won't take long. And then to move on and review the use of chrome, where it's used, and the challenges facing the chromium industry today. Before I start, as a public company on the FTSE 100, I have to put up this slide. Everything I say, I never said. You never heard it, and we'll move on. ENRC, this is our operation. If I use this here. As you can see, we're very nicely located between the potential growth market of Russia, one of the BRIC economies, and we have a natural border with China here. Inside Kazakhstan, we have our major plant here in Aksu. This produces over 1 million tons of ferroalloys a year, comprising mainly of high-carbon chrome, which is over 750,000 tons a year, silicon chrome, silicon manganese, and also the potential to produce ferrosilicon. Here we have Aktobe, our smaller ferroalloy plant. This produces around 270,000 tons a year of high-carbon ferrochrome and 60,000 tons a year of combined low and medium carbon ferrochrome. In order to produce the ferrochrome, the chromite is sourced here from Donskoy. Donskoy has a capacity of producing around 4 million tons a year of chromite. The plant of Aksu is fed with power from Pavlodar, and the power station in Pavlodar, which produces over 11 billion terawatt hours of electricity a year, is fed by the coal mines of Vostochny. We also have our manganese ore mine here and our Shubakol open pit mine here, which produces a higher grade of coal than Vostochny, higher calorific value, and also has the ability to produce semi-coke. In addition to our operations inside Kazakhstan, we also have an operation at Serov. This produces around 80,000 tons a year of high-carbon ferrochrome, a lower quality of ferrochrome than we produce in Kazakhstan because of the grade of ore used. And we also produce a further 100,000 tons capacity of low and medium carbon ferrochrome at this plant. The good thing about our company, therefore, which you've probably picked up from the quick overview I've just given, is that because we have our own coal, which is a very, very cheap source of material for producing electricity. We mine the coal at less than $5 a ton. We produce the electricity at around 1 cent a kilowatt hour. This enables us to supplement a very good source of power for our ferroalloy production. So we're nicely vertically integrated, our own coal, electricity, our own ores, which gives us a good advantage on the cost curve of the industry. In addition to the electricity that we produce, we also supply third-party sales, and we also have our own logistics. I think at the last count we had over 10,000 rail cars and containers to move our material around so that we're not so reliant on the local railway system. So when it comes to our assets, we have over 50 years of supply of or reserves of chromite, and we have resources something approaching 70 years of chrome resources as well. As regards projects, we currently have a project underway which is due to come on to line early 2014, probably around the end of the first quarter. This will bring 440,000 tons of capacity of ferrochrome. And this shows you the foundations of the furnaces going in. This was about a year old, this furnace, this picture. We will have a capacity, as I say, of 440,000 tons. That'll be derived from 4 75 megawatt hour furnaces using the latest DC arc technology, which will give us substantial advantages when it comes to our cost of production. So we no longer have to use coke, which is the staple reductant for production of ferrochrome using submerged arc technology. We will use anthracite instead, and furthermore we'll be able to use fines in the charging mechanism through the DC arc electrodes, which will save on agglomeration costs of our chromite. The higher recovery rates will also be achieved around about 92% as opposed to the current 85% and the industry standard of 83 to 84%. And we will significantly reduce the number of people that are needed to produce this tonnage from around 2,500 to less than 400 people. So that will further undermine our cost competitiveness on the cost curve. So moving ahead now to the chrome market material floor. Obviously the base of everything is chrome ore, and as you can see from this slide, over 90% of the chrome ore that is mined goes into the metallurgical sector. And when you then drill down to sort of see where it then goes, around 2/3 of it goes to the stainless steel sector, just over 25% to the alloy steel, and then the others is your aerospace and high alloys where you're using chromium metal and low carbon chrome. But all of these go into a wide range of end users: transport, electrical, engineering, building construction, metal goods, and other applications. The thing that everybody forgets is that stainless steel actually only exists if you've got chrome in there. Without chrome, you don't have stainless steel. It's not nickel that drives stainless steel, it's chrome that drives stainless steel. Now, if we look at the growth of stainless steel industry, which is the main driver for chrome, you can clearly see here from the slide that the blue section at the bottom, which shows India and China, that has been the real big driver over the last decade for the growth of stainless steel and therefore the growth of ferrochrome. And if looking at the other areas, you're looking at relatively low or stagnant levels of growth for the other areas in stainless steel throughout the world. In fact, last year, Europe actually contracted, and as did Japan the year before. Stainless, however, is not the only area, as we said, for the growth of ferrochrome. You can see here clearly on the left-hand slide the dark part at the top. This is the growth of alloy steels. And this is really where high-carbon chrome is predominantly used, as opposed to here in stainless steel where you tend to use charged chrome. The difference being charged chrome is 52% and less chromium content. High-carbon chrome is over 60%. But what you do see here, again, is a significant growth in China within the special steels and the foundries. China is going to grow its special steels to around 50 million tons by the end of 2016. This is part of their 5-year plan, and will therefore mean that they will be more self-sufficient in the building of machinery steel, machines for industrial use, etc. But also the foundries will be more self-sufficient. They'll be providing the castings for the automotive industry as well. So you see here also growth of high-performance duplex steels and heat-resistant steels, special applications, also growing in China as China becomes more and more technical and moves more and more up the value-added chain. So it's no surprise when you look at how chromium's first use has developed that you see here the chrome manganese steels have grown the most over the last 10 years, significantly because of the use in these emerging markets, primarily of China, and secondly in India. It's been a very, very nice, cheap substitution for the expensive nickel-based austenitic alloys. And you can see here, austenitic has maintained its growth rate just above the average growth rate of 4.9%, but you can see here that chrome manganese, ferritic steels, tool and high-speed steels, and even the carbon low alloy steels have all run at a much faster pace than austenitic, and that's primarily because of the rapid ramp-up in the price of nickel during 2006, 7, 8. Stainless steel dynamics, the consumption dynamics. For sure, the consensus is that growth of stainless steel is going to continue to occur in China and the emerging markets. Why? because most of the middle class, as they get wealthier, they aspire to the Western ways of life. They want the cars, they want the washing machines, they want the tumble dryers, the dishwashers, the televisions, etc. And that is going to spur more and more the demand as people become more wealthy in these economies. And particularly in India, it's well recognized by the economists that the middle class is what drives consumption. And India has got a very, very large middle class relative to China. And you're seeing this coming through in India, although India is plagued with a lot of diplomacy and bureaucracy by the government. If we now look how the stainless steel industry has managed to grow, obviously we need to look back at chrome ore. And the main issue is the chrome ore imports to China. If you look here, you can see that last year South Africa exported to China around 4.5 million tons. It was basically all but stable in the supplies that it shipped to China and allowed China to produce ferrochrome. India increased its supplies, and the Kazakhstan, we supply a very, very nominal amount. But you can see here how, this is just the top few, how they have, China, developed and tried to break away more and more away from South Africa, diversify their supply base of chromite units in order to feed their stainless steel industry through the ferrochrome domestic production. And as part of the South African supply, the main driver of the South African supply has been the UG2 chromite. This is basically a byproduct of platinum mining. In the past, they used to mine the Merensky Reef. From that, they used to get nickel and copper credits. They then found it was cheaper to mine the UG2, and this was a cost-conscious decision that was made. But unfortunately for the chromite industry, the byproduct is UG2. And as the platinum industry has come more and more under pressure, so they've had to consider ways of increasing their revenue. And part of this has been to develop the sales of chromite, which were hitherto thrown away as part of the waste of mining the platinum units or PGM units. But what is of concern is the way that the market is growing for this. The supply is growing. And you can sort of see here the growth rates that have occurred over period for UG2. And this has been very much the driver for the supply of chromite to the Chinese ferrochrome industry. So you can see here the supply of the chromite and how it continues to sort of grow, although it was, as I say, flat last year. That was mainly because of a build-up of stocks at the end of last year and the ability to consume from stocks. But with that, you have got an ever-increasing trend upwards in the production domestically of ferrochrome. And ferrochrome, which is more akin to a high carbon quality, higher in chromium than charged chrome, and that's mainly because the Chinese tend to prefer that. They run on a much lower scrap ratio than the Western producers. The Western producers much prefer the charged chrome with the lower chromium, the high iron and the high silicon content, which they get for free. So today you've got a Chinese production which is around 3.3 million tons. Last year they were the largest producer of ferrochrome in the world, overtaking South Africa, who, with the problems that they had with Eskom, were barely less than 3 million tons, significantly down from their peak of around 3.6 million tons. And that has meant that because the domestic production has increased, you've seen a significant tailing off in the imports of ferrochrome from overseas countries. So this, because the imports into the major growth area of stainless steel are beginning to decline, in an industry which is hitherto oversupplied, it's creating a major problem and a major imbalance and putting pressure on prices. Now, if we look at costs, it's interesting to note that China has always been above the cash cost of South Africa. The main cost component for China has been chrome ore over the last 5 years. And to a lesser degree, they've seen some inflationary activity on reductants and primarily also on labour. What you see here, though, is that the cost of chrome through inflation in South Africa has gone up significantly. Also energy, because of the energy rules and regulations from NERSA, that prices have to increase to support new capex within Eskom, and again we've got another 8% increase coming through next year in South Africa, and further you also see the cost of reductants increasing. The interesting part is that if one was to look at these costs, South Africa would probably be even higher, were it not for the fact that currency has managed to help them out of the mire. And you can see here how the currency of the global ferrochrome producers has transpired over the last couple of years. The tenge has been relatively stable, that's the green line. The South African rand, you can see the ever declining, the grey line here, right down. It's decreased by over 22%. So their cost in dollar cent terms would have been at least 22% higher. And bear in mind that the graph we were looking at earlier was basis cost of production not landed. So China immediately has an advantage on a landed basis over the cost of South Africa, because you've got the cost of getting it to China, and then on top of that you have to pay the import duties. So currency has been a major factor in determining the shape of the cost curve of the chrome industry. And here you can see what's happened to the chrome industry. This here was the cost curve 2007. The blue, it was the cost curve, much higher in 2011. And now in 2012, you can see how South Africa is reaping the benefits, as are other producers reaping the benefits of devaluation. So these are all factors which are putting pressure on the price of ferrochrome. So if we look at what's happened to the pricing of ferrochrome, in the past there was reasonable correlation between the ferrochrome benchmark price and China's crude steel production, because China today is producing around 16 million tons out of around 34 million tons, 34.5 million tons of stainless steel produced. So now it's a major player in the stainless steel market. And in the past, as stainless steel production went up, so we saw a trend upwards with the chrome benchmark. But after 2009 and the trials and tribulations of the global economy, Chinese stainless steel continued upwards, but the benchmark trended sideways and downwards. And what we've actually seen is that the tender prices inside China have actually tended to very much influence here the high carbon ferrochrome, charged chrome spot price as a result of the oversupply, the buying power of the local producers of stainless steel, and the nervousness of the producers of ferrochrome inside the domestic market, who leverage very much their buying power on the chromite market and try to gain advantages through their timing of their purchases. And unfortunately, the correlation between the benchmark price and capacity utilization over the last 2 years has tended to diverge rather than converge. In the past, you used to have a high capacity utilization, and that was always a very good indicator of price. Now, where you see these price increases, they've been for other reasons. These have been due to shortages of power, cutbacks in South Africa, which have tended to be factors which are short-term in affecting the price rather than long-term fixes for supply-demand. And moving forward, again, it's likely you'll see an increase in the second quarter again because of the ESCOM cutbacks, late quarter 4, quarter 1, which have affected supply and created a temporary supply shortage, and again forecast by Parisa possibly in quarter 4 when you may get a similar cutback again as you had later last year. So what's the outlook for the split of ferrochrome? Well, the blue line shows you charged chrome production. Charged chrome production really is not going to increase very much. Most of that increase is due to Xstrata's Lion project, and it's debatable whether or not there'll be a full impact of that, purely because they may well take off old capacity and replace with a new, cheaper capacity and do a balancing act. But what you can see is a continued growth here in the ferrochrome supply, and that is mainly going to come from China, and then secondly our expansion in Kazakhstan. But China is going to become more and more self-sufficient, whilst ever it manages to continue to get cheap chromite from South Africa. If South Africa were to put some export bans on, export duties, then the situation may well change. And you could see this production here diminish and this production here increase if the electrical capacity is available in South Africa. But that has also been a major stumbling block for all the South African producers over a period of time. So looking forward to demand, what we can say is that at the moment there's very, very mixed pictures in the world economy. Overall, the IMF is forecasting a growth this year of around 3.5%. I think that's been revised downwards over the last few months from originally 3.9%. The main growth areas, as usual, China, the usual suspects as well, BRIC economies, Brazil, India, Russia. US is looking good at the moment, but when it comes to Europe, pretty stagnant, if not slightly negative, and probably UK, given the trade data that came out earlier this week or late last week, that could be relatively high. So, but the positive takeaway is you are getting growth, and growth on growth every year does create eventually an erosion of any supply-demand imbalance. So from that we should take positive note on all commodities. It may take time, but we're trending in the right way, and hopefully we will get there eventually. There are other problems which also face the industry. Like all metallurgical industries, we've got processes, and these are going to be severely scrutinized by all producers because obviously carbon emissions impacts through taxes. Also, people have to look at the amount of gases they emit, and they want to try and get the best possible recoveries. So unit cost of production, the way in which the technology is used and leveraged is going to be more and more important, and as is obviously the fuels. But not only the fuels that are used in the process, but the fuels that are used to generate the electricity, because that is going to be a big kicker in the costs of production in the future as to how people produce the electricity that drives their furnaces. So, you know, using off-gases to diminish the amount of reliance on coal production of electricity is going to become very, very important. So, in conclusion, yes, stainless steel is going to continue to grow. There's no doubt about it. China is going to be the growth, along with India, secondly, for the world stainless steel production. And Parisa is still predicting around just under 5% growth year on year. This year, the prediction is around 36.5 million tons, so slightly over the 5%. Hopefully, a lot of that driven by infrastructural spend in China at the moment. UG2 chromite, as we discussed, is a major factor in the production of ferrochrome and therefore directly affects the ferrochrome supply balance. And that is going to be interesting to see how that one works out. There are reviews underway by the South African government again as to whether or not they put on export tariffs and how they do this. But if that was to happen, it would certainly push the price of chrome up, and in pushing the price of chrome up, it would be a positive for the industry, because you've already got industry leaders who are making losses every year. The power shortages in South Africa will remain an issue. They will continue to occur for some time, and South Africa is not expected to become power neutral until at least 2016, and then power positive thereafterwards. So the cost push pressures for the industry will remain. That's labour, that's transportation costs, any greenhouse gas costs that they're going to incur, as well as labour in some of these countries, particularly South Africa, and electricity costs, which will affect all producers across the world. Energy continues to go only one way as a result of greenhouse gas legislation. The big unknown is foreign exchange. Foreign exchange can give a lifeline to industry. It can also cut industry overnight. We've seen that South Africa has benefited from 22%. Had it not had that, you'd have probably got half the industry shut by now. And that's not really an exaggeration, because as I've said already, some of them are already losing money. They rather sell the power back to the grid and make more money for that than they do by selling ferrochrome. Legislation, as we've said already, is going to impact further production costs in the future. And the only way out of this is going to be to have a resource base which is high quality, allows you to produce a diversity of products using the latest technology, which will be the key to survival and being able to therefore enhance and maximize your revenue line. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for an excellent overview of the ferrochrome industry. Do we have some questions? Whilst you're thinking of a question, maybe I can lead with one, if I may.
Yep.
I wonder if you could just expand a little bit more about the economics of UG2. I'm interested in thinking about could that be expanded? How do they work on the cost basis of production, and where does the ferrochrome produced from UG2 fit in the cost curve?
Well, the UG2, when they mine the UG2, basically the chromite comes out for free. So at the moment, because the platinum industry is under great pressure, it was hitherto put on the dumps, thrown away. Now they recycle it, they bring out the chromite, it's then sold through a different number of different channels. Some people sell it directly to China, other people sell it to the local smelters, and the local smelters in certain instances sell their mined chromite because they can get a higher premium for that than the UG2. The problem is that the UG2 is not necessarily really sold with extra value. It's almost, they don't create the proper value for the UG2. And the UG2, primarily when it's then exported from South Africa, goes to China. Now, China, to some degree, produces, like it does with many other metals, unproductively in certain instances. They're looking at social, economic issues rather than environmental. They want jobs. They don't want social insecurity. But the fact is that by the time they produce and they blend all these different ores off, they are able to produce a product which, with the proximity to the consumers, gives them an advantage with transport, with import duties, and with where the South Africans sit on the cost curve to be able to still compete. So although they are technically on a cost curve basis towards the top end of the cost curve, on a delivered customer basis, they're very much in the thick of it when it comes to being able to compete with the cheaper producers. because of that disadvantage. And on average, the South Africans today will pay an additional 12 cents a pound over the cost that we showed there on the slide to get material from their plants to the consumers in China on a CIF basis. And then on top of that, you've got the import duties to then pay. So there's quite a large amount of buffer, which with the Chinese, who don't work on a return on capital basis all the time, allows them to say, okay, I can only make $30 a ton, but $30 a ton on X thousand tons a year, I make a profit of $1 million or $2 million, it's good business for me. And they don't have to worry about environmental considerations. They don't have the baghouse filters. They don't worry about wearing hats, helmets, goggles, etc. You see it when you go around the plants. So there is big concern. There was a meeting a couple of weeks ago where the Chinese government threatened to get more tough with legislation around environmental. We've heard it before, we've seen it before many times. Only time will tell whether or not this happens.
Do you think that method of producing ferrochrome is going to put a pressure on or create a change in the structure of the ferrochrome market?
Well, we are seeing some of the smaller ones with the smaller furnaces go out of business, but that said, we're also seeing some very large projects coming online. For example, Mintao in Inner Mongolia, they're putting up a plant of 1 million tons. First phase is 330,000 tons, and it'll use the latest Outokumpu technology. So, you take with one hand, you give with another hand, as they say. It's not always positive.
Any further questions? Marcus.
Two questions to you. First of all, do you wear helmets in Kazakhstan?
Sure.
Sure, okay. Now, the South African situation and the UG2 exports to China are a little bit also the child of the high electricity prices and the electricity shortage there. First question, do you think that this has an expiry date? That means as soon as South Africa has its electricity problem solved, they will stop exporting that UG2 at too low prices, which is obviously the case, and convert it into charge chrome themselves again, like in the past? First question. Second question, what do you think is the real cost advantage Chinese stainless producers have compared to Europeans on the chrome side?
Okay, can you leave the room, Gert? Look, I mean, first and foremost, you're not going to have an overnight flick of the switch if duties come off and there's enough electricity. I think a lot depends upon the fundamentals of the industry, and you've got some big players with a lot of money invested, and I think the banks today are very, very nervous about financing new metal projects. So I think anybody wanting to sort of put up new projects would probably have to be vertically integrated, and by that I mean have access to UG2 rather than necessarily buying it and then building a greenfield site. Yes, in theory, you could see more production in South Africa if there's more electricity, but as I say, it depends on the dynamics. Equally, are you going to see an id pro quo, a one-for-one knockback in Chinese production? Not necessarily. As I intimated there, China's done a very good job of diversifying its supply base. It's just a question of, to some degree, how much it could potentially leverage and ramp that up in different parts of the world. It's not going to take over South Africa's supply base totally, but there is obviously a proportion that it could. It increased last year from Australia, and certainly there's potential within places like Oman to source further quantities of chromite, although Oman is now, given cheap gas and also its local chromite, looking at producing its own material as well itself. So a similar sort of vertical integrated model as we have, ore, power, alloy. As regards pricing, certainly, as I showed on the graph, it would appear that pricing has, on the spot market, become more and more closer when you take into account logistics and one thing or another closer to the sort of tender type net prices. What I can say is that what you don't see on that slide is that the benchmark discounts have significantly increased. And really, I suppose, in hindsight, it's wrong to put the benchmark up there as an indicator for price, because the benchmark was a good indicator, but because of the Chinese influence, it's become a very bad indicator, because it suits stainless producers to have a high benchmark number, because obviously that feeds through to a stainless steel, higher stainless price because of the problems in trying to get the base price up for stainless. But at the same time, it's meant that increases in discounts have occurred. And one of the bones of contention, really, of the industry is what other business in the commodity field gives discounts of up to 20% on its commodity? I mean, it's crazy. Why not just price the benchmark at the correct level? Which is why you had a reversal back in 1992 in the benchmark pricing when it was reset and the discounts were reduced. And maybe we're approaching that again now.
Well, in stainless, it's up to 60% discounts on any published prices. But so the last question, you don't want to nail the number down, but is it more or less than 10 cents?
I think the number you've quoted might be a good barometer, but time will tell. Time will tell.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Mark?